Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of SDN Community Voices, your bi weekly live touchpoint with the SDN community. And I'm Joumana Mattar, your favorite host and SDN ambassador. So, super excited to have you here. Today, I'm going to mix it up a little bit. And usually, I ask you to drop in the chat where you're joining us from. But today, I'm curious about what are you doing in parallel as you tune in to our live episode. So, tell me in the chat, are you perhaps driving to work, or you're maybe winding down for the day? Or you're taking your post-its and notes and started scribbling all the liquid gold from this amazing episode. So yeah, drop that in the chat. Now, as we do that, I'm going to come back to today's episode. And right now, so many of us are facing and navigating so much complexity and uncertainty, be it personally, professionally, or globally, even, right? So, in a world where we're all searching for clarity, I guess you all have so many questions around how can we better design to have certain outcomes, or what is the right way to lead, or how do you make the right decisions in such an uncertain state. And if you are curious about all these questions, you're in the perfect conversation to actually have those discussions. So today, for our 50th episode, I'm super excited to bring our guest, Joumana, who is a design strategist and organizational coach. She guides individuals, teams, and organizations to parse through this uncertainty. And at the edge of uncertainty, today we're going to dive into these complex questions and conversations. And before we dive in, a quick reminder, all of you, please drop your questions in the chat because we're going to take them live at the end during the Q&A segment. All right, now let's bring to stage Joumana. Hi, Joumana. Thank you
Hello.
so much for joining us today. We are super excited.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much, Sudeshna, for inviting me. I'm very, very happy to be part of this ongoing Community Voices. It's beautiful.
Amazing. So, Joumana, tell us, as we just start the conversation, maybe I'll take it in a different approach today. I'm
Okay.
curious, rather than walking through like just your whole career trajectory, I'm
Mhm.
curious about in your career, what are some of the recurring themes and maybe questions that you have that have kind of guided your career? So tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and our audience is excited to get to know you.
Oh, thank you so much, Sudeshna. So my name is Joumana. I'm Lebanese. I'm based in Madrid, Spain. I've been here for the last 13 years. So just a bit of, mixing up all the cultures and language. I might have a few French, Arabic, English, Spanish words flow in. So if it's not understandable, just, let us know in the chat. If there's a weird word you have never heard of before, that's probably me mixing it up. So as you said, I'm a design strategist and I'm a certified coach, which basically means I'm very passionate about helping people and teams understand how they can be empowered to make impact and change, right? So the reason I entered into design was because I was like thinking, do I want to do education? Do I want to do nursing? Do I want to do design? And I was like, okay, I think design is the place where I get to touch on all these different disciplines, but on a different lens. So I think basically what's been very present for me all through my career is this idea of curiosity, like what's happening, why is it bubbling up, also with a very strong lens on impact. Like I really believe that things need to exist, right? And we need to try them out. And that's why I started working with suppliers, because I was like, a great graphic design idea that doesn't get implemented doesn't really get to have impact, right? Or to be like, okay, I'm designing something, but I'm not really answering why? What's the business question? So, oh yes, and my cat will join our conversation as well, somewhere in the background. Yeah. So yeah, there was like, okay, so how can I make a bigger impact? So I went into design management and service design, and then I was like doing this and having all these stakeholder meetings with business, and I was thinking, but why is there resistance to this? What's the context? What's missing for us to have a deep discussion that's going to impact our employees and our clients? And that's where I started to go into coaching. So it's kind of this curiosity about why and what can we do to have a enabling conversation that takes us to new places. So that's kind of been like the little hidden trigger also.
That is you mentioned so many different things I want to touch on. First, the multilingual part, that's amazing. Like, just to be able to engage with audiences in so many different languages, that is, I would be curious enough to know how design translates there. But just to, I guess, get a sense of, as you said, that it is curiosity led, and you've always wanted to be at the intersection of so many different things, right?
Mhm.
How did you kind of stumble upon coach at the intersection of design and coaching?
For sure. So the fact that, when you're an expat living in other countries, you always have to find a way to express yourself, right? To make it clear what you're trying to say, because there might be phrases that make sense in one language that don't. But if you think of it, design and business also don't speak the same language. If I go into a meeting talking business words like OKRs or KPIs to an audience which is not fluent in that, I'm going to alienate them. And the opposite, if I'm only talking about research and qualitative research and archetypes to an audience that isn't fluent in them, I'm also going to lose that audience, right? So I found myself more often having to be like this kind of bridge or translator, because it wasn't about the quality of what we were putting on the table. It was the fact that people were more interested in their personal positions than a shared goal. So that's kind of where I found out that I could be more impactful if I could create the space for the conversation that needs to happen, and not just be like defending a work I've done or a work my team has done with the design part, but especially when talking to business stakeholders. So that's where I started out in coaching, and I do a lot of workshops. I love facilitating. I like to create space where we can de-roll for a while. And I think coaching gave me a lot of tools and a new set of concepts that help me be more fluent in people and what they need to really show up and tell us, their real concerns, their real desires, their real fears.
That is so interesting. And a lot of the times, I guess that kind of alignment and translation that we need in those spaces
Mhm.
requires so much. I'm going to take one step back here and ask you, what is something that you do while creating such a space that seems so obvious to people, but it's invisible work? People don't realize that you're doing it,
Mhm.
but it has a huge impact.
I think it's really important to prep. I think we are all very busy. We have a very short attention span. You started off by asking what are people doing in parallel, and I can admit to having doodled in all the calls and hope my cat didn't jump onto the screen. Like, we're pulled in so many directions that I feel like if we're inviting someone to come and be present and to really dig deep, there's a lot of prep that needs to go into that, selecting the right welcoming question, modeling the vulnerability we want to see, also holding everyone accountable and not letting the most popular voices or the most common voices like dominate the conversation. And I think that's a lot of presence. Like, you need to be really, really there. That's your gift. That's what you're giving the people who are there. And I think it's when it's really well done, it's invisible, but
Yeah.
I don't think it should be taken for granted. So
Yeah, I think very few people can see, hey, what's the flow of the conversation is going, like what's happening in the background to even enable the space, enable that conversation. So there's a huge ton of work that goes into facilitation. Is there, like, when you're having these conversations and you have stakeholders from all different like maybe industry or organization come in,
Mhm.
initially you start out at a position where people are not aligned, and that then get to kind of a place of alignment, right?
Mhm.
So in that flow, have you ever been like, aha, this is where I know that they're aligned now? Like, is there a language, mindset,
Mhm.
body language? I don't know what that looks like. But what is it for you that gives you that, aha, I've finally gotten them to a point where I need them to get to?
I try a lot to create spaces where there's a bit of imagination, right? Like I think we're, especially because I work with a lot of mature design teams. So these are people who have a trajectory, who are experts, who are also references in their field, and they've been through a lot of workshops. And I don't want this to be just one more, right? This is supposed to be a space for you to be hosted, which is a gift as a leader because we're the ones holding space. So I think it's a huge gift to be able to de-roll. And at the same time, it's about giving you permission to play and not have to be the expert. So if you introduce new ways of doing, maybe things we haven't done in a long time, like maybe drawing or embodying or like moving around, using the space, we're not randomly in this space, we might as well make it an active participant, then suddenly I think I see masks start to be shed. So I stop being the leader of the team and I go back to being the curious person who likes this topic, right? Or I find out that actually I love to do things where people find out about each other things they didn't know that connect them, like we have pets or we have tattoos or we hate lettuce, like there's so many things beyond the professional facade
Yeah.
that and when I start seeing people like being a bit vulnerable, for me that's an aha moment. And maybe also when I start witnessing people leaning in with curiosity, that's another aha moment. I think more than like big statements, you just feel the shift in the room when it's no longer me defending something
Right.
versus me exploring something, right? So there's the magic.
There's a shift. Yeah, yeah. That is so interesting. Like, I've never thought about, in leadership coaching, starting to talk about vulnerability, and there's the sense of personal connection that you're saying that you create in your engagements, because that's I guess been more of my personal experience in healthcare. We kind of do that, but what
Mhm.
does that look like in a leadership context?
I think we have kind of like there's been a lot of change in what leadership means, right? Like we went from top down hierarchical leadership to a concept called servant leadership, which is the leader at the service of their team. We've also gone in different structures, right? Like leadership needs a container. So
Mhm.
you have matrix organizations, the big ones, you have the scale ups, you have flat organizations. So we can't really separate the form from the content from the container, right? So
Yeah.
they kind of reflect back on each other. And that's why a lot of teams, when we talk about culture and team dynamics, it's important that we acknowledge that we exist in a structure that will enable more of certain behaviors and inhibit other kinds of behaviors, right? It's not just you as an individual and what you want to give. So going back to your question, I think leadership for me now, especially when you talk about uncertainty,
Yeah.
because we cannot really predict what's coming, we can look at the triggers, we can look at the signals, and we have to decide what am I willing to live with, right? What's my threshold of learning? Where
Yeah.
is my boundary where I will say, I actually don't want to do this, right? So that's very personal. But it doesn't mean that I am exposed, right? Like vulnerability is a very charged word
Yeah.
because it makes us feel like I'm standing here with no armor and everyone has their arrows and they can like just shoot it. And I need to take it and be a good leader. No, I think vulnerability means like I own my process for the good and for the bad. And I'm conscious of this is going to be an easy threshold for me to go through. And this is a place where I'm encountering my own resistance. And so being a vulnerable leader means it's okay to say you don't know, right? You have a team for a reason. You have amazing peers in the world for a reason. Like I used to do that a lot with my team. I used to be like, I know this person is really good at this kind of engagement. I'm less good at this kind of engagement. What I can do is create the right space and host them, and we drive the client together where we want them to go. Doesn't mean that I'm a bad leader if I'm not the one doing everything that needs to be done, right?
Hmm.
So, but in order to make space for others to share leadership, that's vulnerable, right? That's not day to day. So I think that's the gift we can do. Like I was talking to a friend of mine who's leading a team, and they've transformed their practice using AI, and it's not about making things faster. They've redesigned the mindset, right, in their team. And so I was telling him, so how do you help these team members of yours like go through the pace of change, because it's actually quite
Yeah.
fast? And he's saying, but I think that's my role as the manager, right? It's to make it about curiosity and about play, and at the same time honor that it's painful and it's a process. It's hard, right? So my job is not to make it harder, at
Yeah.
least, right? And then my job is to make it actually more enjoyable while you're going through the process. So yeah.
That is incredible. I think Christopher says like threshold of learning. Really love that. We're always at that threshold of learning. I'm definitely really curious about
Mhm.
the part where a lot of leaders find it difficult to kind of separate the leadership from themselves and be like, hey, I can actually depend on other people. And as you say, there are times where I don't know is a very valid thing to say out and be like, let's figure it out together.
Mhm.
Right.
Definitely.
What is the toughest challenge? Now, it's actually a two-part question. One is, how does individual and team leadership coaching or organizational leadership coaching differ from each other? And
Mhm.
then the second part of the question is kind of looking at, hey, what is the challenge that you encounter in these different rooms
Mhm.
um, to help them even break through their leadership journey?
Brilliant. Oh, it's lovely questions. And shout out to Christopher. We worked together in Lebanon a long time ago. He works a lot on acknowledgement and working with employees and leaders, and he's a lovely, lovely peer. So
Amazing.
definitely someone to check out. So I think for me, the difference between individual coaching and team coaching is when you're going through individual coaching, it's usually led by the person themselves, right? They come in, they have a challenge. As a coach, your role is to accompany them. We always say that the coachee is the expert in their lives, right? I'm not going to be an expert in Sudeshna's life. She is going to be actually the expert, and she will be accountable for all the growth that she needs to do, right? But it's instead of going through the dark, you have someone who's walking with you on the journey, who has a nice big flashlight, because you're looking at the road, and they might be like, oh, what about the trees over here, or what about this little cat over there, right? So suddenly you expand your horizon, and
Hmm.
from that sense of expansion you can take new decisions, right? And because they're scary, and because we're not made to be alone, you're meant to be in community. Having someone on your side as you go through that process is kind of like the gift that the coach gives you, right? And and people who come in for leadership coaching, they're also probably having some kind of thing they want to own, like maybe how to be more assertive, maybe how to be, sharing their view in a different way. Maybe it's about actually pivoting their career. So they
Hmm.
come with their own challenge, and that's what we explore together. Whereas in team coaching, this is usually brought in by a leader of a team, and they can be a team that went through a reorg, a team that has been newly formed, a team that had some kind of exit, a team that's been asked to do something they've never done before, right? So there's a moment of transformation that's upon them, right? And they're conscious of this, right? And so usually the invitation is to, first of all, give the team a new language to work with. Like we talk about change curves, we talk about grief, we talk about crossing the border of uncertainty, what toxins and behaviors show up, right? Because if I can acknowledge what's happening, I can deal with it. If I only keep it under the carpet, that's really hard to get anything done, right? So that's one part. And the other is that they want to acknowledge that every person in the team is valuable, right? It's like, football team. We have the goalkeeper and the defense. They don't play the same role, but we need all of them together, right? So I think they want to go from being a group of people to a team.
Hmm.
So, and that's usually initiated by someone who has the role of leading them or the vision of leading them. And they really also, it's a kind of commitment to their team that you are important. I want to listen. We are building this together. And the signal of that is basically investing time, space, money, budget, people to form this. So they don't just take it for granted that someone put us on an org chart and therefore we are a team. No, right? So they take it a step further.
Yeah,
So so yeah, I think it's a lot of it's a huge statement when people do team coaching, when because it's for me it's like they're betting on their team to win, right? They're
correct.
saying, I care about you enough that I want to invest in this and make this work for all of us.
That is so true. And I'm also hearing a couple of themes. One is, as you said, like an individual versus team coaching. There's a part of accountability. In individual, I guess accountability is more self, whereas in team it's shared and aligned
Mhm,
accountability. So it becomes a lot more like difficult to manage it
mhm,
as we go along this journey.
mhm,
Also a little bit curious about the organizational part. So when you do move from, you talked a little bit about individual, team, and then what does organizational leadership coaching look like? Is it more change management, or what does, yeah, what does that look like for you?
so I think there's a part of, like, you know, the famous F word. It's not the one you're thinking, it's feedback, right? So feedback is like this huge thing in organizations, right? And
What was the word?
it's
Feedback.
feedback.
Feedback. Okay, yes, of
Yeah.
course.
So when you talk about feedback, there's like, it used to be a gift, then it became a sword, then it became something we use ChatGPT to help us make conversations, but everyone's using it, but then no one's talking to each other, right? There's this. So I think in organizational systems, we really need to think systematically. Okay, so if we're saying we're an agile, dynamic organization, we need to have spaces and practices for this kind of agile, dynamic learning and accountability to emerge. So sometimes what happens is that we see a disconnect between the system and the culture that we want to create or co-create, right?
Right.
Or we have things that whenever we think of organizations, we have like these. There's a von Strompenars has a really cool model about culture, and he says it's like an onion with 3 levels, and like the external one are the artifacts, so the logo, things you see, you know, the dress code, and then the second one is like the rules, the guidelines. So we have a casual Friday, we work for days, we are remote, no, and then the core is like the beliefs, right, the values. And
Right.
so a lot of companies, what they do is they just change the outer layer. Oh,
Hmm.
we have casual Fridays, but the core belief is still, let's say, structure and rigidity. So then, even if you've changed the outer layer, the people in the organization feel a disconnect, right? They
Right.
feel that the value isn't reflected out, or that there's a promise that's being made with an artifact or a rule that's not really translating into their, you know, day-to-day
Day-to-day life.
experience, right? So I think organizational coaching is one about identifying where the disconnects are and
Hmm.
also creating prototypes for this new behavior to emerge, right? So maybe we cannot change the HR system at scale, but we can start piloting in this unit, in this geography, right? Or like maybe making collaborations with external partners. So these are ways where organizations can start to prototype new behaviors that they want to see emerge. So I think that would be like how all the pieces of the puzzle like just come together.
Came together. That is such a beautiful example because I was thinking, oh, if you're a hierarchical organization and you're actually shifting to a different structure, in that particular example where they've
Mhm.
added like weekly meets or after hours, whatever it is for
Mhm.
connection, the
Mhm.
value of connection is not reflected. It's more like, hey, I have to be there for my superiors, and it's extending the work time, which people might actually find um, demotivating, or even have like a barrier to, hey, why are they making us do this? It's taking away from our personal time.
Yes, exactly. it can be counterproductive. And that's why I think and I think we should just own, like I like cats, it's okay. Some people don't like cats, that's also okay, right? It's not about imposing your view, but it's also about having a view. I think leadership is in part important because your team needs to know what you stand for, right? And they need to decide what's in it for me, because I think one of the I do a lot of work on, like, how we've evolved and the ways of working have evolved, since we had COVID and all the way to now. And like
True.
the trending topic this year is something called FOBO. So
Oh,
FOBO, it's new, not FOMO, not FOJO, it is FOBO. So FOBO is, ooh, I lost Sudeshna. Ah, there you are.
okay. Yes, I got disconnected for a moment. That's
No worries.
fine. Yes, Turbo.
FOBO. So FOBO is basically, it means the fear of becoming obsolete, right? So right now we are in the, especially in the design field, we have a lot of tools that are now coming in, a lot of changes in mindset and processes, right? We're kind of feeling this anxiety because because we were in a huge position of power and we were used to being the instigators of change. So it's nice to be the one making people change. It's not so nice to be the one having to change, right?
Needing the change.
So that's a big thing there, right? And then there's this other thing of, I'm going to need to reinvent myself, to reskill myself. How much energy do I have to do this? Because it can be that I'm super excited. I just graduated. I'm like, of course, what are they saying? Change. This is like business as usual, evolution. And it can be that parts of what you do have enmeshed with who you are. So you start to feel it is more personal. Like, if I stop doing research, does that mean I'm no longer a service designer? Right?
Right.
So we start having these kinds of questions. And I think it's this invitation of, okay, how do I own my journey? How do I stop being a victim? How do I stop saying it's this person's fault or this technology's fault or this geography's fault? There's a part where we need to own our learning, right? Which also means saying, I want to do this or I actively do not want to do this. But it's my choice, right? So I can't blame anyone else later. So I think that's
That
like
is true.
really, really critical, you know?
Yeah, you've talked about personal identity, like which is so enmeshed with professional identity. It's so hard for people to actually pull that apart right now. So many of us are grappling with this question, like, hey, am I still a service designer if I'm using maybe different tools or moving to more tech conversations because of AI? It's just naturally happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then you talked about personal accountability, that, hey, own your journey, as even if you are diversifying or moving into different directions, own your journey. And even if it's a failure, that's okay. That was like a trial. You did the trial, maybe it didn't work out,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And I think as you're talking about this, I started thinking about uncertainty is our topic for today. So
Yeah.
I am super curious, what do you think about uncertainty personally? Like, if it had a personality, let's make
Mm.
it fun, okay? If it had a personality, what would it be like? And how have you seen people, individuals, a team kind of react to that?
That's a really good question, actually. For me, uncertainty, it's kind of like a prism. So it just looks, it's like just a specific shape that depending how the light hits it, it can show you things or nothing, right? So there's this idea of revelation for me with uncertainty, which can be very exciting and very scary at the same time, right? So I think there's this part of, we want to be in control because control gives us a sense of safety or security. And we are in a geopolitical world right now, which is very complex and where it's very easy to feel powerless or helpless. And I at least keep on getting this question of, what's my impact? What am I doing, right? What am I trying to show up as, right? And my conclusion has been like, we're kind of like this little drop. So wherever you are, you get to do a ripple effect,
Hmm.
and that's what you can control. I cannot control geopolitical tensions, but I can make sure that I host a space for respectful conversations, right? So that's within my control. I can help designers in transition, because actually a lot of what's happening is grief. Like, we have a huge amount of unprocessed emotions that we do not have a container to explore it within. So for me, there's a lot of things around rituals, storytelling, the imaginary, that we can bring in to allow people to explore safely these different things that are happening. Like, one of the biggest things I learned in coaching, like the first lesson like you go through, is that I am not what I do, right? I am more than what I do, because
Yeah.
we have the beautiful capacity to keep on learning and unlearning. So we can learn and we can unlearn, right? So that means we're going to keep on evolving and changing. That doesn't mean we always, welcome change with arms wide open. I think it depends on, like, I was reading the other day something around capability and capacity. I can have the capability to do something, but I may not have the capacity to do it right now, right? So allowing ourselves some grace is important. And but we're in a mode of push, 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 push. Like, we feel stressed, we might become obsolete. We have this new thing someone told us, and if we don't know about it, we don't feel so up to date. But actually, service design is beyond that, right? Service design is about understanding what's the experience we want to deliver, understanding who are the people engaging with it internally and externally, and then finding out the best sustainable way, planet wise, business wise, employee wise, financially, all of these reasons, to make it worth putting out into the world. That's what we do as service designers. Then the journey can be post-its, it can be in Smaply, it can be in using AI with a prompt. That doesn't change that what we need to do is have the conversation, document it, and figure out ways forward to make an impact. That's what we're doing. And we will still do it, right? But
Yeah.
the shortcuts, they can change, and they will change.
True. It's like the goal is set. We as service designers, we're asking the right questions, but the path to the goal can look different, and it can be winded, could be like a I don't know, a wormhole from one side to another.
Alice in Wonderland, you can just go down the hole and don't know where you're reaching. It's all possible. It's all possible.
True, true.
Yeah.
And like I love how you talked about grief and rituals in this space, because not a lot of us think about those aspects of like I guess letting go of one identity and then moving on to the next, like embodying a different type of identity as your leadership.
Mm.
What does that look like? Can you share with us an example? I'm very curious about it.
Yeah. No, of course. I think for me, at least, I'm someone who's usually very impatient, right? Like, I had to learn how to be patient, which meant that I had to kind of like train myself to look at patterns, right? Because it's so easy when we're in a bubble, in a problem, in a challenge, to just see that. And it's really helpful for me. And service design taught me this, how to zoom out and look at the overall picture and be like, okay, what's happening here? And then I don't like to stay at that level. I like to get in and get my hands dirty and get something done, right?
Yeah.
So part of this zoom in, zoom out is the fact that grief for me has been something very present in the last 2 years, right? I was part of I had been in consulting for a long time. I had gone in-house into an HR company because I was like, oh, I love coaching. HR company, that's where I'm going to be like learning so much. And I did learn a lot, but it was also a company going through a reorg. And I was a part of a team that got laid off, right? And that was something I had never ever imagined I would go through. Like, to be super honest, it wasn't even on my radar of possibilities to prepare against. And then I was in this situation, and I was like really having to process, what does it mean for me as an individual? What does this mean for me as a professional? And a lot of these feelings were coming up, and I had to find a kind of, framework to be able to understand, right? And to come back to this, okay, what, and because like we have this idea, there's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross made a grief wave, like she maps
Okay.
out grief and change. And we have this idea that it's actually linear. So if you go from rage to acceptance, you're done. And it's not. It's actually like a ball of yarn, and everything is like you take one thread and everything's connected. So I think a big part of this was also like just giving ourselves more tools, like maybe going back to poetry, maybe going back to nature, maybe going back to embodied practices, walking, getting out of the head and into the body, right? And that's why for me, I really like rituals. I think they offered us a container to explore something that's very fragile, right? So I use rituals a lot in my work. I also use a lot of myths, because myths are something that allow us to de-roll, right? If I'm talking about myths and stories, like if I'm talking about Alice in Wonderland, it's not Joumana going through all this labyrinth of change. It's Alice, and as Alice, I can learn some things that I might not be ready yet to perceive as Joumana, right? And Joumana, team member, whoever that is, right? So I think we have all these beautiful tools that help us reach where we need to reach, right? And it doesn't have to be through the push strategy or the forcing myself to learn, right? Like there's this question of how do I own my journey? Okay. and and it's important because, like, there's this lovely lady called Marzia, and she has this substack called Design Mavericks, and she just published today something about the hero's journey, right? And the hero's journey or the heroine's journey, it's a journey you need to do that makes sense to you. No one else will understand why you took this decision or the other, but you know that if you don't take this decision you will be incomplete, right? So I think rituals, storytelling, these are all different tools that we have. As designers, we are very open to also exploring them because we like imagination, we like creativity, we like scenarios. So for me, I think these are things we can bring into our practice to complement having to learn the KPIs and the OKRs and the product delivery versus discovery and all the other, the prompts. Like we have a lot of things that we have to learn that may feel as a foreign language, but I think myth, ritual, storytelling, these are kind of our base, right? This is where we come from.
Yeah,
So bringing them back in kind of also, I think it offers a good space to explore from.
that is so true. Joumana, thank you so much for sharing that personal story. I think a lot of the world right now is going through something similar or different, as you said, career pivots, or they're in this phase of transition and uncertainty. And there is so much need for having rituals to kind of lay that foundation and hold us in
Mm.
as we navigate these changes. So, really appreciate you sharing that. Now, since we were zooming in quite a bit, I'm going to zoom out in your language and bring us to a little about KPIs, OKR. As you said, when we talk about organizations at a bigger scale or as we scale up, right? A lot of the times we're always thinking in systems, processes, flows, and it's so important to balance that very technical business side with the design and the human side. What has been your approach to kind of creating that balance in the room, especially in leadership coaching?
For sure. So I think the first thing I do, so I'm a big fan of creating glossaries. So I think, especially like when I went to this HR company, they were using a lot of acronyms. Like there could be a whole title which was like 6 acronyms. I'm like, I don't even know what we're talking about, no? So I think we need to have this kind of glossary of what are the terms that are used in this room and how can I use them correctly, right? Because as we said, we want to build bridges. I'm not looking to alienate you. I'm going to have a position, a clear one, but I'm also trying to build a bridge to really listen to you clearly, deeply, not just talk at you, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's the first thing. Like we need to be able to understand what's happening, and we need to be able to educate in human friendly language what we're trying to communicate. So that's for me like the very, very first thing that I would always do. And I think I will try to understand why is it that this is the KPI they're looking at, right? So for example, NPS, right? We all know it, it's the net promoter score. And it's powerful not because of what it indicates, but because a lot of different departments agree that it's a good indicator, right? So marketing agrees that it's a good indicator, another business unit, the sales team. Suddenly we're having this as a critical part of our conversation. Like, and if I want to move the needle, I need to understand why they're looking at this and try to see what other evidences I can provide that supports the thing they're trying to learn about, right? So if I'm trying to learn if my brand reputation is actually really strong, I might say, okay, here's the NPS that you asked for, but here are some probes that we've done, for example, listening to Gen Z on social media. Or here's like part of the research that we did, qualitative, based on this latest product release that we did, right? And why am I bringing in these specific pieces of information that design has worked on? It's because I understand businesses' end goal is to understand brand reputation, right? So there's a part of literacy, and I think it's important that we are literate in the rooms we are in, okay?
Yeah.
Because it's a way of also owning our power. But I also think that it's our role as ambassadors of change to bring in the voices that are not in the room, right? And that we can do using a lot of design methodologies, a lot of design probes, right? And so we bring them in, and that's where it becomes fun for us because we like to tell stories. We need to think, what's the arc? What am I bringing them from? You know, hero's journey is you come in, you have a challenge, there's a, momentum or something gets solved and then it's resolved. There's other kinds of stories, right? Like there's the rags to riches, like Cinderella. That's a totally
Hmm.
different story. There's the story of the underdog, right? So I think we need to go in, like the prep part, that secret invisible sauce. I think it's really important. We need to be intentional. What am I going in to say? And if I have that clear, then I can pick and choose the evidences that help me tell a more compelling story, right? And maybe the important part is that if it's a monologue, that's not fun for anyone, right? So where are the parts that I embed buy-in into the story? So where am I going to pause and say, hey, sales, what do you think about that? Or hey, PM, my product manager, how has this showed up in your sprint sessions, right? So
Definitely.
you hold the story, but you co-create it, you weave in more voices, it
Hmm.
becomes theirs, and then suddenly it's a more powerful story, right?
That is absolutely brilliant because I love how you've highlighted just shared language. That was the most important, like creating that glossary and creating a shared language for everyone to connect with each other and have like alignment. And then you spoke about co-ownership at the end, like where you were like, hey, like get them to own and co-create it with you, so you hold the flow but you're still co-creating with the people around you, and they also feel like it's in sense theirs as they create. And
Mhm.
then you spoke a bit about, I think, um, language, this thing, and there was one more point that you mentioned. What was it that I thought was really great?
I was
Mm.
very excited. So that's
Don't worry, don't worry. I think our audience caught it. So let's see if they actually did. I'm gonna lean it for our audience too. We're actually going to transition to a Q&A. So
yeah.
audience, please help me out. What was one more point that Joumana just shared? And in Q&A, as we wait for people to drop in their questions, please
Mhm.
take a moment. This has been super insightful conversation. Drop your questions for Joumana. And as you're doing that, I have some questions I know everyone's been asking so that we can get started.
Mm.
A little bit of, if like for our audience who's listening in today and navigating uncertainty in their work or life, what is
Mhm.
one small shift in perspective or practice you'd like invite them to do? It can be a tool, it can be a method. What would it be?
I really like to have a gratitude practice, which
Mhm.
is where you document one thing a day that brought you hope, that you're grateful for. And it can be as simple as today I had a lovely chocolate bar, or it can be I got this lovely word of recognition from someone, or simply the moon was so beautiful yesterday and it shone through my window, right? So I think training ourselves to see hope.
I think you disconnected for a moment, but you're back. Good. Training
Yeah.
yourself to see hope.
Yeah, I think that's like for me the most useful practice, like, and documenting it, and then the days where it feels really heavy, just look back and then start seeing a pattern and realize, so what actually brings me joy? Is it like going for a small walk? Is it phoning someone? Is it having a yummy bite? Is it maybe sleeping? Is it exploring my hobbies? Like, you'll start to see what are the special things that work for you.
Yeah.
And and I think that's a really good practice, especially when everything is like all over the place. Knowing where your anchors are, it helps me a lot. So
That is lovely, knowing where your anchors are. Amazing. So Tamara just says, thank you, Joumana. She loves your co-creation approach for building stories. And then we had a lot of just beautiful comments about, uncertainty present. People just love the way you've been thinking and sharing and creating like stories and frameworks for people to understand that. That is amazing. I have one question for you here. I think it was posted
mhm,
previously. What
mhm,
is the role of design leaders has evolved significantly, and we did chat a bit about this. So what are the three must-haves for a leader right now that they should embody to kind of move and be successful in the next couple of years?
mhm. Okay. I think the first must have is like kind of like just reconnect with your why. Like, why are you a design leader, right? Like, what do you bring and what does it bring you? So for me, that's the first one, like just to really center yourself as a design leader with your purpose. That's because a lot of things are going to change. So you need to know why you're doing what you're doing, right? And the other one would be like to bring back this idea of play, no, and not to take everything so seriously. Like, we feel right now that we have to optimize our time, and it's kind of the antithesis of experimenting and play, right? Like, I want to learn this new tool, but I have 3 minutes, so I cannot just learn. I need to have an output that I can share and justify. So having spaces where the goal is to experiment and being able to model that, I think is going to be very critical. And the third one, as a design leader, um, I think it's a gift to have a team, right? And I work as a freelance now, so I definitely miss having a team and a community. And I think if we have the gift of a team, uh, our role as design leaders is to make ourselves accessible, right? And to have a space where we de-roll. So I have a cousin of mine who's an expert in insurance, and I had to build a deck on insurance point of view for the Middle East. And I was like, she's like 12 years younger than me, right? And business, and I'm design, like, we're different worlds, but I respect her opinion a lot, right? So what I did was like, I prepared my deck and I went to her, and her role was to teach me and give me
Hmm.
feedback and tell me this makes sense and this doesn't. So I think as design leaders, we need to open the space and be really willing learners, right? And then we'll pick up if this is something we want to become experts in or not. But the gift of having a team is not a gift to be wasted. So if you have a team, use them and let them use you, right? Like, use is not the right word, but like, exchange.
Yeah, depend
And
on each other. That's incredible. Thank you so much, Joumana. And now we are moving into the last two questions. So, people, this is your last chance if you have any more questions for Joumana. Um, so, last question. We were talking a little bit about play, and here's where I would love to know. Like, a lot of people are comfortable with ambiguity till they aren't really. So, what do you think is one thing leaders lose when they try to push for certainty early in the conversation, when they're trying to define, when they're not able to sit with the discomfort of being in the abstract?
Mhm.
What does that look like? What does that look like, and what are they missing out on?
Definitely. I think one of the first symptoms of having pushed too quickly is silence. When you start like going into rooms and no one is like sharing anything, and it's silent, it's like silence of the lambs, that's usually a sign that there's compliance and obedience and there's not real acceptance. So for me, that's like the first warning sign. And I've been called in to work with teams where there's no conflict, which was
Hmm.
surprising. I thought I would only be called in to work with teams where conflict was like the name of the game, but they were more worried when people weren't talking to each other. So look at it.
Right.
So I think ambiguity, when we push too hard and too quick, it means we didn't make the groundwork of getting buy-in, right? And there's
Yeah.
one practice called deep democracy. It was piloted in South Africa. And it's one of the ORSC coaching system tools. And it's very powerful. So it says that when we want to take a big decision, we explain why it's there, we open rounds of discussion, and then we do rounds of voting. And at some point, we reach a decision, right? So let's say, should we or should we not go back to the office? Okay. And imagine the decision was 5-2 that we should go back to the office, right? What do we do there? Usually we stopped there. It was democratic. We had a vote. It's done. What they do is they invite in a question called, what do you need to come along? So the majority has decided 5-2. We need to come back to the office. What do you need, person A who voted against? What do you need to come along with our decision?
Yeah.
Suddenly we're flipping the story, and they might say, well, I need to be able to come in 4 days a week, not 5, or I need to be able to come in from 10 to 3 instead of 9 to 5. Suddenly we have a whole range of solutions that we didn't even consider, because we were in binary mode and it was yes or no and get with the program. So that's for me a huge part of like, you need to create buy-in and people need to be accountable.
Hmm.
And if they want to stay, because we are all adults, no one is forcing us to be where we are. If we stay, we need to see what's in it for us, how we can make it work. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's important. And I see there's a question here about
Yeah, it's
what.
like the second part of the question is right there. Like, how do you usually decide what not to focus on in such ambiguous situations?
That's a really good question. I think like it will depend. We have all these matrices of what's urgent versus what's important or what's time sensitive, right? I think when things get really ambiguous, we need to see, or maybe what I would do is I would try to think what would make the most impact on my work or my team, right? Like, and that's where I would start the focus. And if there are things that have to do with the artifacts, like what clothes we're wearing, what tools we're using, no, like things that can and will change over time, I would probably deprioritize them. Or
Hmm.
what I would do is to say, if it's a people thing, I would prioritize it over everything else, right? But
Right.
right now, I think one of the things that's showing up a lot with the teams I work with is how do we reposition design strategically within our organization? That's
Hmm.
the that's a recurring question I've been hearing, and there I think the role is, what's the vision we're bringing as designers, right? And secondary to that is, how are we going to upskill ourselves, and with the new glossary, the new terms, the new tools to reach there. But the first thing is, what's important to us. The rest of how we get there, that's what I would deprioritize, because first we need to have an intentionality, a purpose, right? And then actually maybe what I would do is I would split people into exploring different avenues and bringing back healthy design critiques, right? Like,
Yeah.
I tried Claude, you tried Lovable, I don't know who tried whatever, ChatGPT, Cursor, Figma Make, whatever. And let's actually bring those perspectives together and debate and share our criteria. That's what's important. The shape will change, the
Yeah.
criteria and how we took our decisions, that's what we need to share, right? So I think that's what I would do. I'd really make sure we're aligned on where we're going first, and then the rest will come along.
That is super important. Thank you so much. Like having that shared direction, vision, and then being able to just create like that layer of, hey, everything on the how will change, but the what needs to stay stable and keep guiding us. Amazing. With that, we're coming to an end to the conversation. I have one question for you as we go to the end. What is something that you have been dying to answer, but no one's asked you till today?
Uh, I think maybe it's about how do we how do we keep showing up for ourselves, right? Like I think this morning I went to write down like these ideas and these questions. I was thinking like something about being brave, which doesn't mean being loud, but it means like really owning where you are, and that can sometimes mean giving yourself rest, and that can mean sometimes opening up to receiving a call, and that can mean sometimes just being a beginner again and doing something you've never done before, right? So I think for me, like to keep on evolving as a practitioner, and I think designers, we are practitioners. I think that's the question, that what do I need to be brave and show up for myself, right? Where's that, where's the edge of my certainty, and where's that next threshold that I feel I'm called but it's so scary, and what can I do to make it less scary, right? So that's where I think I would just love people to maybe just take one step closer there and peek over the edge and see if it's like exciting or not. And they don't need to cross, but just take one more step, like own your curiosity again. So yeah, I would love people to just like not just ask me, but like maybe share with me ways that they've like taken a step closer to that edge, and so I can be inspired as well, and keep on.
Amazing. That was like mic drop, title drop moment there. Everyone share in the chat with Joumana, like what is the edge that you're peeking over right now? And connect with her. Joumana, any last words as we end this conversation?
No, thank you so much, Sudeshna, for the invitation, for making it happen, for hosting the space. That's lovely. And I really like the message behind the SDN Community Voices. I think a community is so important now. So thank you for that. I'd love to, I have a Substack where I write some stuff, and I definitely will need to write something after this, all these good questions that we got here. So thank you for that as well. And if anyone's interested in doing coaching or hosting a process for their team, just reach out on the website, on Instagram, on my email, wherever you want. Just reach out. I promise to always answer. And let's see how we can explore some stuff together. That would be lovely.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Joumana, for joining us today, sharing your stories, sharing your incredible frameworks and storytelling. Your thinking process is just so beautiful. I'm sure you've won over the audience. And we were really lucky to have you today as our guest, and looking forward to more conversations, more collaborations, and see you again soon. Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Ciao, ciao.
All right. Thank you, community. This was a brilliant episode. Hope you have your notes. And I see some more comments come in. Like, yes, we do agree we need to learn to speak different languages, also the language with our hands, not just with our minds. And we bring in more voices. And that's what we're doing here in Community Voices. Every bi weekly, we are bringing more voices to you from the world of design, so that you can share your thoughts, processes, mindsets with the community. Now, as we're doing this, I want to have two quick promotions with you that I want to share. Like, as you all know, SDGC speaker call for speakers is open, so please submit your speaker proposal. As a design leader, you're changing the world, and we would love to know what you're doing, and bring that transformation to us and share it with SDGC at Frankfurt conference, which is happening in October. And if you have any questions about the call for speakers, please drop it in the chat. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. All right. With that, thank you, everyone. See you on the 12th of April. Bye. Have a great time.